Let's discuss a bit about that. What that means is you're going to assessment. Remember the assessment? We were talking about all these questions, how you're going to assess. These micro-assessments you're making. You're going to ask these questions. If you're going to go from bond to challenge, you got to be getting yes to a lot of these second group of 8 questions. And you got to be getting no to all of the first 4 questions. So, is my child doing an ISM and a STEM? If the answer is a really strong yes, you got a red light, people. You got a red light. You can't go on a red light, can you? You get a ticket. I tell you, I will fly over to where you are. I will write you up a ticket if you go past that red light. I'm just messing with you. Don't worry, I'm not going to fly over and give you a ticket, I promise. The other thing is my child excluding me from what he or she is doing? Again, if they're being really exclusive, you're getting a red light. Is my child really rigid? If my child's really rigid, you probably have a red light too. And if your child's non-responsive, you certainly have a red light. If your child's ignoring you when you speak to him or her, definitely have a red light. But if your child starts to look at you, if your child does start to respond if you call their name, if your child starts to appear more flexible with something changes, if there's a change and your child doesn't need everything to be their exact way, then you're starting to get a green light. So you get a green light if your child's looking at you. If your child's being more responsive, your child's being more flexible. Certainly if your child's being really physically affectionate with you, that can be a really big green light. If your child's moving over to you, that can be a green light. If your child's involving you in his or her activity, absolutely can be a green light. If you make a request and your child's immediately responsive, that's a green light. If your child's talking to you, that's usually a green light. Not always, but usually. So you're going to start to now ask these questions and know if you have a green light. Now, I will tell you, once to be aware of this, you want to get, if you're going to really go into the challenge area, you want to really get a solid green light. So if your child's been giving you red lights and you've been bonding, you've been joining, you've been giving control, and that's happened, let's say, for the past 45 minutes, and you're really doing that, and your child glances up at you, yes, that's a look, and you definitely want to celebrate that like you would in the bonding category. That does not mean you've now gotten a resounding green and charge ahead, right? Because you've just gotten a tiny blink. You basically got, in a sense, a yellow light. So it means celebrate that look and be real easy and be real slow. Don't jump into a bunch of, now look at me, now play this game with me. Be real easy with it at first. Wait till you get a nice, good green light. So if you get a real strong green light, which means you're getting strong yeses to those questions we just went over, then you can start to really move ahead. And you don't have to do it all at once. You can start with a small challenge and start to build up from there. Now, what do we mean by challenge? Again, we could spend a whole webinar on challenge and still only touch the surface. So I'm going to touch the surface of the surface right now. And that is these 5 areas. 1, you can do that by requesting. And that's something we talk about a lot in our advanced programs and actually in our startup as well. That just means you're asking for something. Oh, I'm not sure what you said. Can you look at me? Oh, you know what? You're pointing to something. I'm not sure. Do you want water or do you want ball? Can you say ball? You're asking for something. Oh, you want this? Tell me ball and I can give it to you. Or if you have a child who is more an Asperger's syndrome child and is more verbal and you're not teaching him to say words like ball, they have much more sophisticated language than that, then at that point your request might be really different. Your request might be to play a game that involves taking turns. Or if they're even more sophisticated, you might request a game where you just ask them a question and then they ask you a question. Or you might ask them to tell you about something that they really love and then ask you about something that you like. So you're gonna start to get more sophisticated as your child gets more sophisticated. But you're going to request something if you're challenging. That's one way to challenge. It's not the only way, by the way. It's just one way. Another way is to just initiate something brand new. So your child is is now giving you some really solid green lights. You can just initiate a game, meaning like you can be riding on a giant pillow and pretend it's a horse and go, all right, I'm on the horse. All right, woo-hoo. All right, hey, you got to get your own horse. Or you got to hop on my horse, or what? And there's requests in that game, but you're starting with just initiating a game or an activity that's completely different than what your child's been doing. So requesting is you're simply asking for something, and initiating, which in essence has requests that can be part of it, is just initiating a brand new game or activity. Again, you want to have a really strong green light if you're going to initiate something brand new. Third, play dumb. Play dumb. Now I say play because many of you guys, you're too darn smart for your own good, especially about your child. You know everything that you know your child so well, especially if you're a parent out there. You know what their different cries mean. You know what their different word approximations mean. And look, if you're in the bond category and they even throw the slightest approximation of a word to you, you go do it. You be responsive because you're being user friendly. But if you're in the challenge box, if you're in the challenge area, then you got to start to play dumb, which means you got to start to not capitalize on all that intimate knowledge you have about how your child operates. That means if "buh" means ball and you know that, you got to not know that anymore. So now, this is if you have your child's willing engagement. Now, if your child says "buh," you might go, you know what? Thank you. I know that means you want something up on the shelf. Oh, you know what? I don't know what it is. There's lots of toys that start with "buh." Which one do you want? Or maybe if your child's just starting this, you want to help them out a little more, and you might even say, "Oh, I think it might be the ball." If you want the ball, say "ball." Right? So now you're asking for something more, but you're doing it by playing dumb. You're not sure what your child means by things that maybe you kind of do have an idea what they mean. You're going to start to play a little dumber about that because you want to challenge your child to step it up to the next level of communication. That's what challenging is all about. When we say challenge, by the way, we mean challenge your child to stretch their thinking and to stretch their interacting, to stretch their interactivity, how much they're interacting with you and with other people, and to stretch their thinking, which means stretch their flexibility, stretch their communication, not just verbal communication, but all types of communication, facial expression, gestures, all the kinds of ways that they would communicate. Stretch that. It means you want to stretch your child, how long they're willing to interact with you, how long of a game they're willing to play. If they're only willing to play a game for 7 minutes, you're going to want to stretch that to 8 or to 10. Right? So that's what challenge means. You're challenging your child to take more active participation in our world, which really entails a lot of reorganized thinking on your child's part. It's really amazing. But because of that, you need a huge amount of motivation and you need a huge amount of bonding that's already happened. That's why if you jump over B and you just go from A to C when your child isn't ready for it and you don't have that bond with your child, your C isn't going to go anywhere. You're not going to really be able to challenge your child because your child won't go along with your challenges. This is the thing that we're really aware of in the Sunrise program. You can't challenge your child without your child's permission in some way. Because at the end of the day, your child could just ignore you. Right? They don't have to do it. So you want your child's willing participation. You want your child's willing engagement. You want your child to want to interact with you and be challenged by you. That's the key. Then you can start to ask them to stretch. That doesn't mean they'll be able to do everything you're asking for, but it means they're going to try and they're going to put their energy into it, and that's what's going to make all the difference. So you need a motivated child to work with this challenge area, which means then they're motivated to do your requests. They're motivated to do the games that you've initiated. If you play dumb, they're going to be motivated enough that they're still going to try and communicate with you. Those are the first three: request, initiate, play dumb. Last two. Number 4 is build outward from motivation. Build out from your child's motivation. That means you take something your child's motivated by and you add to it. You basically build out to it so that it requires a little bit more interaction. Right? So let's take, if you have an example of a child who is really loves cars, and he or she is driving cars along, but now they're giving you more willing engagement and they give you a car to play with and they let you ride the car next to them. But the game maybe is very repetitive. The cars have to go in a circle and you have to ride your car behind their car. But they're still being interactive. They're looking at you often. They're responding if you ask them something. So you still have them. Now you might want to say, now you can add one thing to their game, like, now I'm going to, if you were helping their flexibility, you might say, all right, hold on, wait. there's a brand new gas station over there. Hold on, we got to drive our car to the other end of the room to get the new gas station. So we might be asking them to drive their cars all the way over to the other end of the room with us. Now you might think, I don't get it. If I'm trying to help my child with autism, what does it matter if they move their car to the other end of the room with me? I'm not trying to change to help that behavior. And that's why I say this is not a behavioral program. It's not the behavior of moving the car that we're trying to teach. We're not trying to teach all your kids to move their little toy cars over to the other end of the room. The reason why we do that is because that is a challenge to your child's flexibility. If your child is really attached to driving the cars in a circle and you ask to move the cars to the other end, you're asking your child to be flexible within their game. Right? Now, if you're asking for big flexibility, you might ask for a totally different game that doesn't even involve cars. But that's a much more flexible kind of thing. This is just a little bit of flexibility. But that's what you start with. So if you're challenging flexibility, that might be one thing you were doing. Now, if you're building out from a motivation in another way, it might be that your child wants you to drag them by their feet, and their butt's on the ground and they're facing you, and you're pulling them by their ankles across the floor, right? And you might get tired, and you might want to make sure that you know that your child really wants you to pull them. So if they're looking like this and they're saying pull, you might go, oh, I'm not sure you're talking to me. Can you look at me when you tell me that? And then they might look at you and say, pull me, or pull, or whatever. Now, what's neat about that is, again, you're challenging something that's difficult for a child in their own world, which is to really look at you and take you in while they're communicating with you. So then you might go, oh, that gave me my energy back. Now I can pull you much harder. I'm only giving you, by the way, the most simple explanations. If you want more with this, I would recommend that you not only take the New Frontiers and the Maximum Impact, in addition to the startup, but also one thing that I think will be very helpful, and I looked at some of your questions, which I'm not going to be able to answer some today because some of them don't pertain directly to this subject. You can call us and you can actually book a phone consultation wherever you are, and we can. These phone consultations are so useful, I can't even tell you. I really think you should have one really regularly every week, or at the very least every other week, because what this does is it enables you to get your questions answered, work through challenges that you're having, and help your child through new challenges that they're having. And that entails, it's really easy to do. You call us up at the 413-229-2100 number, or the 1-877-SONRISE. You call us up at one of those numbers, and you basically just say, I would like a phone consultation. You can book it with one of our teachers, and you can ask questions and get help with these different kinds of areas. You can get lots of new ideas for challenging your child. You can also work through a challenge or a discomfort you're having if you're getting frustrated with something about your child, or you're feeling like you're doubting yourself, or you're scared. We can help you with that too. It's an incredibly helpful one-on-one time to have. You can even use them to have you and your spouse or your partner on the phone together, and we can do a dialogue or a consult together with the both of you. That's completely fine. You can either both ask questions, or if you're having an issue in your marriage or your relationship, which really affects that always affects your therapy with your child, we can help you with that as well. So I strongly recommend getting a phone consultation. I think that will be very, very helpful to a lot of you listening. Now, my throat, by the way, is going to just get progressively worse as we talk, so just bear with me here. When you're building out for motivation, remember, you already have your child's willing engagement. You're getting yes to a lot of those interactive questions of the assessment category. So you keep going back and assessing your child, and you're seeing how interactive your child is. When you're doing number 4, which is building out for motivation, you're using something they're already motivated by, and you're stretching it a little more. You can also, if you know they really love dinosaurs, you can bring in some toy dinosaurs, and you can use that as something to motivate them with. But you're only doing that when you're in the challenge category. Now, lastly, last piece, number 5 under the challenge category, is focus on social goals before academic goals. This is so incredibly important, because there is an obsession with academic goals. The webinar that I do, that's the Sunrise program versus ABA, key differences, which you can still watch on our website. That explains all the reasons why we focus on the social goals before academic goals. So I'm not going to do that whole explanation again, except to say a couple of key points. Number one, autism is not a math disorder. It's not a reading disorder. It's not a school disorder. Autism is a disorder with interacting with other people. So if you want to help your child, don't teach him to be great at math. Teach him to be great at being with people. Right? That's where we want to aim our challenges. Now, if we have a child that really recovers from their autism and comes out of their autism, then absolutely we teach them the academic skills to catch them up. That's exactly what happened to me. When my parents worked with me, when I had first come out of my autism, I didn't have academic skills, math, reading, whatever. My parents taught me that before, caught me up to speed, and then I went into school. And that was the easy part, because by then they had my interaction. But first, we need interaction, we need connection from a child. And you know what's interesting? There's more and more evidence coming out that actually focusing on teaching repetitive academic skills or really discrete skills like behaviors actually helps your child to be more autistic. You may succeed in teaching the skill. You may get your child to be great at math or get your child to say hi and shake hands with everyone that they meet. But what you're doing is you're actually teaching their brain to be more rigid, not more flexible. You're actually teaching the brain to do more of what the autistic brain does. Isn't that interesting? So what you want to do is we want to teach the brain to be more flexible and more interactive and stretch in new ways that maybe your child's brain isn't used to, and is going to help them be less autistic and more interactive. And so that's what's really key here. So we don't want to focus on the things that our child's brain's already built for. We want to help the brain stretch in new ways. That's what my parents did with me. And as a result, the social stuff growing up was like no problem for me. I mean, that was never an issue. And that's all because of what my parents did with me. So focus on the social goals before the academic goals. Really key. And that is the 5 pieces of challenging. Now, there are also 4 main areas of challenge. And to know more about this, you can come to New Frontiers, come to Maximum Impact, but you can also go on our website, autismtreatment.org, and you can go to the Sunrise Program Developmental Model. And that shows the 4 main areas of social development and the 5 stages that progresses in. But I'll just mention the 4 areas so you can think about it. Eye contact, communication, including language, attention span, and what we call interactive attention span, meaning attention span. Your child might have a great attention span with lining up cars, but we mean interactive attention span. How long can they play a game for? How long can they have a conversation for? So that's interactive attention span. And flexibility. That's not even on most people's charts. In fact, this obsession with getting children to obey their schedules and planning their schedules out in advance, because children with autism need structure and they need schedules, right? Again, what that does is it teaches them to be more autistic. You want your child to be more autistic? Do more schedules with them and do more rote memory stuff where they have to obey specific rules. We want to teach our children to not have to obey the rules, to be able to be flexible and change with what they're doing. And that's why teaching flexibility is just so important. We're not about using pet card schedules to teach our child what comes next, what comes next, what comes next. We're trying to help our child to have spontaneous interaction with other human beings. That's what's going to matter most. That's what's going to impact their quality of life, how they interact, what your relationship is with them, and ultimately, it will interact the most how they do in school. Their math skills is going to have far less impact on how they do in school than are they able to relate to people. That's what's going to make the difference. So, those are the 4 areas: eye contact, communication, interactive attention span, and flexibility. Now, what we're doing here, and I just want to remind you with this ABCs, and then we're going to take some questions. What we're doing with ABCs here is, remember, you need to do it in order. So you want to keep going back to A and assessing your child, making sure you're bonded with the B, and then if you have a green light, you can go over to C. And everything you're doing is really, keep in mind, especially if you're in C and you're in the challenging, you want you want to be inviting. You want to have what we call the 3 E's, which is energy, excitement, and enthusiasm. You want to be excited about what you're asking your child to do. You want to be excited about what your child's doing. And you want to be, this is something we talk about a lot, you want to be selling your child on our world. You want to be selling your child on how great it is to interact with people, and how great it is to try new things that might be hard, and how great it is to look into someone's eyes and be connected with someone. So that's what you're doing as you're moving into that C category. But, by the way, your child can be in the C category. This is another thing to be really, keep your eye on. This is a very dynamic model, this A, B, C. Because if your child's in challenge, and you're challenging your child, at any point, your child could decide to disconnect. They could decide to stop looking at you and go back into an ism. Something like that. That's totally okay. In fact, that's normal. That's what should happen. You challenge your child as much as they can be challenged, and eventually they may decide they're done for that moment, and they disconnect and they go back into their own world. You know what you do? You go back into their world with them. You leave the challenge category and you go back into the bonding category. Now, how do you know you're supposed to leave the challenge category and go back into the bonding category? You're always going back to the A, the assess. You're making these micro-assessments. If you're challenging your child and your child's playing a game and they suddenly stop responding to anything you're asking them to do, now the light's gone back to red and you got to go back to bond. If you're with your child and they've been looking at you and they suddenly stop looking at you and they take one toy and they start playing with it in a repetitive way, then you got to go back to bond. You go back to bond at that point. But you're only going to know to do that if you keep going back to the assessment part and you keep asking yourself these questions. Is my child doing an ism? Is my child looking at me? Is my child moving toward me? Is my child being really rigid, or is my child being really flexible? All of that is part of what you're going to continue to ask yourself so that you know what part of the ABC you're supposed to be in. So you keep going back to A, running through ABC. Back to A, running through ABC. And it almost takes on this kind of a dance idea, because you'll notice that if you get really good at this, sometimes your child will be isming, and then your child will look at you and come over to you and hug you, and you'll start playing the game with them. And then as you're playing the game, they'll disconnect and they'll start looking back at the toy they were isming with and go back to that toy. And you'll stop and you'll go back and you'll ism with them. And then they'll look at you and they'll say, "Hi, Daddy." And then you can go back and play with them and you celebrate them and you play with them and you challenge them. And then they go back. Then they're challenged for a while. Then they go disconnect from you. They go back into their ism. Then you go back to B. So you're dancing back and forth between this bonding and this challenging. And you're doing that because you're doing the A of the ABC. You're doing the assess. If you start dropping the A, you're going to start to be way off on the bonding and the challenging. You're going to start to be, because what's going to happen is, and what most often happens is, people go to C when they're not, you don't want to be in C, or they stay in C when you don't want to be in C. In order to be in challenge, you got to have that maintained interactive attention from your child. You have to have willing engagement from your child. When you don't have that, you got to go to bond. And if you either go to challenge when it's not appropriate, or you stay in challenge, then what's going to happen is you're creating a situation where you're not benefiting the relationship part of, which is the most important part, and you're going to encourage your child to actually connect with you less and be willing to be challenged less and less in the future. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to create a battle here. You want to move with your child. You want to move with your child because you're going to keep doing those micro-assessments. Now, if you stay in bond a little too long and you don't go right to challenge, I'd actually prefer that. If you miss a green light, that's okay, because you know what? You'll get the next one. But if you miss all the green lights, then you won't have an opportunity to challenge your child. So you don't want to miss all the green lights. But if you miss one every so often, that's fine. I'd much rather you miss some green lights every once in a while than not see the red lights. Right? Think about that. If you're driving on the road and you stay parked for too long at a green light, no big deal. You run a red light, you can get into a serious car accident. Right? So that's how you want to think about this. And you'll get better and better at this. And again, if you have phone consultations with us, we will absolutely help you with this. It's not, just from this one conversation, you're not going to know all the answers. That's okay. New Frontiers really, really helps with this. We spend a lot of time in New Frontiers on building curriculum for your child and setting goals for your child. So it's really, I strongly recommend that you come to that. And by the way, Maximum Impact is the other, there are 2 advanced programs, and you want to do both. New Frontiers is all about creating curriculum and setting goals for your child. And there's other pieces to it as well to keep the other parts of the program alive. But that's the main thrust. The Maximum Impact program is all about being a total force of nature, which is key for any Sunrise program to maintain itself. To stay motivated, to stay strong even when people around you aren't supportive. To continue to believe in your child, encourage your child to do more even when other people might not think your child's capable of it. And also to continue to train your volunteers and the people in your program to be better and better with your child. So it is, and Bears and Samaria have a prominent role in that Maximum Impact program. So you definitely want to go to that. You're gonna want both. Now you need to take the startup before either of those programs, and the recommended thing is to take Maximum Impact, Startup, Maximum Impact, then New Frontiers. But if you had to take Startup and then New Frontiers and then Maximum Impact, that could work. That could work as well. But you do need the Startup before either of those programs. Okay, now we are going to take some questions. We've had some different questions that we've gotten throughout our time. Wow, we have a lot. We're not going to get to answer all those questions because that's a lot of questions. First, let me read a question from Portugal. And this is from Madeira Island. I'm not familiar with Madeira Island, but it sounds really nice. Her name is Catarina. Hola, Catarina. Actually, hola is Spanish. I wonder, do they say hola in Portuguese? I don't really know. Here's the deal. I'm going to read. You asked me 4 questions. I'm not going to be able to answer all 4 of your questions. Although, Katerina, I really appreciate you asking them. And sending them in advance. That's really awesome. I'm going to answer one of your questions. But let me read the preamble first. It says, I've watched all the webinars so far, and I've received free information. The Inspiring Journeys of the Sunrise Program DVD, which is free. I'm glad you received that and watched that. And I've also purchased the Breakthrough Strategies for Autism Spectrum Disorders DVD that you did. She's talking to me, and she says, Ron, I'm your fan. Oh, thank you, Katerina. I must say that this information has cured me as a mother. And even though my son still has many challenges to overcome, I have never been happier with him. It's been a blessing to accept and understand how he is and who he is. And every day I feel stronger in recognizing the brilliance in him. Thank you for helping me with that. That is so sweet, Katerina. That is, I just can't even tell you. That is so amazing. That you've really used the materials to get that for yourself and for your child is really amazing. Good for you. I take my hat off to you, and I really respect you for that. That is awesome. Now she says, now I'm putting together a home-based program. 8 volunteers confirmed. Girl, you are impressive. All still to be organized and scheduled. So it's just me and my son, Alan, a 4-year-old. He's not verbal yet. For now in the playroom 30 minutes a day for 3 weeks now. You are impressive. You are seriously impressive. That is excellent. Let me read you one of these questions because I'm just going to read the one that's the most relevant to this subject because your other questions are great questions, but I would recommend getting a phone consult to get those other ones answered. The one I will read is, sometimes when my son is very excited and really enjoying being in charge in the playroom, which I'm sure he does enjoy, he may start doing quick repetitive movements, standing up, going down on the floor, then going around on his knees, and then up again, then down, then around. He goes like that for almost a minute before turning to something else. But this is going a little bit too fast for me to join. As he's doing it, I feel I can't catch up with him. Hey, I don't blame you, man. Though I do try. How can I join him when he is being too fast for me? Okay, that is a great question because that's a key part of that bond category. So, Katerina, nice question. I'm sure other people listening have that question. Yeah, sometimes your child's going to be doing an ism that you can't join perfectly. And you know what? That's okay. Keep in mind, joining is not the same as mirroring or copying or mimicking. That's other people's games. That ain't ours. We're talking about joining. So the difference between joining and mimicking and copying and mirroring is mimicking, copying, and mirroring is all about I'm just supposed to follow the rules and do exactly what my child is doing. That's not how joining works. Joining is actually about forming a connection with your child and a bond with your child based on joining them in their world. So what we say is you want to join in the spirit of what your child is doing. You want to join in the spirit of it. And what that means is, sure, if your child's flapping his or her hands and you can join it exactly, then go ahead and join it exactly. But if your child is doing what you said your son is doing and he's going up, then what you want to do is you want to join in the spirit of it. I had a child that was jumping up and down in a room that didn't have a trampoline. So he was doing it on the floor. And I got to tell you, I can't jump for an hour on a hard floor. That's not so good for the old knees and ankles. But what I did do is I wanted to join that little guy and really show him, like, hey, I'm as excited about what you're doing as you are. So he's jumping up and down. Apparently his knees are just fine. And I am staying on the ground, but I'm bending my knees and I'm going up and down like this, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm joining in the spirit of what he's doing. So you can do the same with your son, Alan. If he does that where he's getting up, sitting down, getting up, then you just do it as best you can. You're just joining in the spirit of it. He's trying to, his basic ism has to do with movement up and down. If you do that basic movement, even if you don't do it as fast as him or as perfectly, that's fine because you're still giving him the same message. You know what's interesting? There's been some interesting new discoveries. I don't know if any of you have heard of mirror neurons. You know what mirror neurons are? They're really amazing. They're actually neurons in your brain and they're in all of our brains. And what happens is when you do something that somebody else does, or they do something that you do, and when you're picturing even something that someone else is doing, what you're doing is your mirror neurons are firing in your brain, which is a way of actually plugging into what another person is doing. Guess what? Children with autism have problems with their mirror neurons. Isn't that amazing? And do you know what is one of the best ways to start to get those mirror neurons firing? Well, you guessed it, people. Joining. Right? Joining. So this is actually stimulating the brain in exactly the way the brain needs to be stimulated. So even if you don't do it perfect, that is totally fine, Katerina. And one other thing, I do want to say this because this is so important. Oftentimes, people see the bond category, the bond box, as non-productive. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting my child to do anything new. I'm not following a curriculum. I'm just doing what my child's doing. How long do we have to do this before I get to move on? So the whole goal becomes joining to move on, right? And joining to be productive. And if you spend too long in this bonding box, then you're feeling like I'm not being productive. But here's the point, and this is so important. This is one of the most overlooked things when people talk about autism treatment. What is productive? How do we define being productive? If being productive, if we're going to define it behaviorally, I get my child to do these behaviors, then joining is not, and bonding is not productive. But I got to tell you, that is not the way to define it if you actually want to help your child start to overcome their challenges. If we want to help our children overcome their challenges, being productive means helping our children overcome their challenges. And one of the ways we do that is by helping form a bond and a connection with our children, which is one of their biggest, strongest deficits. That's what autism is, and that's what we want to help our children to start to overcome. And so what that means is when we're bonding, we're being extremely productive. It is one of the most productive things that we can do. If you just join and be user-friendly, and give control to your child for 2 straight hours because your child isn't connecting with you, I can't think of a more productive thing to do. I really cannot. Because that is what's going to bring your child to a place where their mirror neurons are firing and they're starting to get excited about you and our world. And there's no more productive thing we can do. So oftentimes people see the challenge box as the productive time and the bond box as the unproductive time, when in reality, they're both productive, and in fact, the bonding box is one of the most productive things you can do with your child. So stay in that box if that's appropriate, if you don't have your child's willing engagement. And even if you're there for a long time, that's the best thing you can do for your child to help their development and progress. Okay, so let's move on to another question. I know, Katerina, you had other ones. Call us about that and book a consultation. We can definitely help you with those questions because they're really good questions that you're asking. Okay, we have... All right, we got